Okay, so we use the cout, and the cout, it is used to display any value on the screen. So now in this tutorial we will be learning about the cn, and the cn, it takes a value from the user. Entered by the user is entering this value on a keyboard and save this in a variable. So a variable, it is like a container, and it is storing a value. So the cn is taking the value from the user and save it in the variable. Now first we write the basic structure of our program. So always we should start with the basic structure of the program. So this is helpful and this gives us the big picture. So this is the basic structure of our program. Then okay, so a value, it is taken from the user and save it in a variable. So let's see an example. So we declare our variable int num. This is our variable of the type integer and its name is num. So this will only store the integer, and let's this display the message cout enter an integer. So this message is displayed on the screen to the user, and the user will enter the number, and as the user entered the number, then the cn, it takes that number and save it in the num variable. So the cn, it takes the value from the user and save it in a variable. So we declared our variable, then we displayed our message, and then the user entered the number and we saved it in a variable. Now if the signs, the greater than and the less than signs to the cout or cn, they seems to be little confusing, then we must remember one thing. In the cn, we are storing the value in a variable. So the arrows, they are directed toward the value, the variable. So we are storing our value in a variable, and the values, they are directed toward the variables, while in the cout they are the other way around. So we must remember that the cn is storing the value in a variable, the arrows are directed toward the variables, while in the cout it is the other way around, it is the opposite. So this helps me a lot remembering these arrows. And so I entered the value entered by the user is saved in a num variable, and now let's display it. So the value entered by the user is in the variable. So I run this program and entered the 5, and yes, this stores the 5. And I run this program again and save another value in it, and yes, this is working. So this is 10. Let's run this again, and this time save a floating point number in it. Oof, this gives us a different answer. We saved a floating point number while the number here is integer. So we must remember that our variable is of the type integer, and if we are trying to save any floating point or a number having a decimal point and digit after the decimal point, then the integer variable, it will only show the integer part while ignoring the rest of the digits. So let's comment out that portion, and let's make a floating variable where it is storing the floating value. So this is our floating variable. So the float type, float num, this is my variable, I declare it, and now I display the message to the user. So enter a floating point number. So the user will enter the number. Now I will put this number in a variable. So I use the cn. The cn take the value from the user, and the arrows, they are directed toward the variable, and it is saved in this float num. So this is my variable and it is saved in this. And now let's see if the value is saved in this float num. So our floating point number is, so let's display this float num and endl semicolon, and let's run this program. So yes, entered my number here, 25.354. Yes, this works. So this, the floating point variable, it can save the floating point number, while the integer variable, it can only store the integral number. While if I am trying to store any other data type, then we will be getting into the trouble. So now let's comment out that portion, and let's do some more coding here. So this variable is of the type char, so character variable, I declared it, and this will save a single character. So here I display a message to the user, so enter a single character. This message is displayed to the user will enter a single character, and then cn, it will take that value and store it in a character variable. So the cn, it is storing the value in a variable, and the arrows, they are directed toward the variable. So now let's see if the value is stored in our variable. So cout, our character is, so character variable, and here we are getting these suggestions because we had installed the IntelliSense. So yes, here we will enter the character, so a, and yes, this is storing a. So this is of the type character, and in the char data type, it is only storing a single character, so we must remember that as well. Now let's build the world's simplest calculator. So we will take two values from the user, add them and save it in another variable, and then display it. So let's take two variables, num1, num2, they are declared in a single line and they are of the type integer, and then another variable sum, it is also integer. So let's display our message here, cout, enter the first number. So as the user entered the first number, we will take that number, and cn, it will put that in a variable, so cn num1, so that number is saved in the num1 variable. So the cn, once again we must remember the arrows are directed toward the variable. So the first number is stored in num1. Now we will display our second message here, enter second number. So as the second number is entered by the user, this is a message to the user, then the cn, it will take that number and save it in our variable. So we are saving it in the num2, so the second number is saved in num2, and now we will add these two numbers. So num1 is saving our first number, num2 is saving our second number, num1 plus num2, they are added, and now we will store that in the sum. So it is stored in the sum variable. Num1, num2, they are added and stored in the sum variable. So we will display the sum. So this adds the two numbers, the two variables, they are added, and the result is stored in the sum value. So we display the sum of two numbers is, and now less than sign and sum and semicolon. Let's run our program. Okay, so we enter our first number 5 and 2, so 5 plus 2 is 7. So this is our simplest calculator. It can do the simplest calculation for us. And we can also show which numbers are added and also their results. So let's do that. Okay, so let's finish this line and write this again. Cout sum of, so num1, we will write less than sign and then these kind of comes, and num2 is sum. So this will show the two numbers as well as their sum. So if I enter 5 plus 6, so they gave me 5 plus 6 is equal to 11. So the numbers are shown and their sum is shown. If we enter the other values, so we get the same result. And 6 plus 4 is equal to 10. So yes, this is the world's simplest calculator we built, and